Hey everybody, so welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. Alright, so today what I want to talk about is the frost. What survives the frost, what does not, what has in my garden at least, and you know, what can we continue to plant and why are we planting what we are at this time of year. Alright, so we did just recently have a frost. Now, it was a light frost. We got down to 33, 34 degrees plus or minus a couple. Don't think it ever got down to the hard freeze at 32 degrees quite yet. But the way it's looking, it probably will here shortly, because it's really early for us to be having frosts already. Alright, but we've been having those polar winds, or the polar fronts, cold fronts coming down from above and dipping a lot further down than they usually do this time of year. So I mean, if the last couple of weeks have been any indication, it might be a pretty cold winter. Alright, with that being said, let me walk you around and kind of show you how we're looking after the frost. Alright, so first off, let's go ahead and take a look at our Seminole pumpkins. Alright, so you can see we still have pumpkins on the ground, and we haven't cut these off yet because the stems haven't died, though they're starting to. But you can see, like right here, I mean, that's done. Alright. The plants themselves have died back, which is normal this time of year. So it's not really a big deal. We do have some pumpkins. We'll be harvesting those, bringing those in here shortly. But yeah, they're done for the year. They're produced as much as they're going to. Alright. Olive trees. I have not seen olive trees lose their leaves. They do pretty well maintaining. So that's pretty good. Lemon trees. Now the lemon trees will keep their leaves unless we get a hard freeze. At least that's been my experience so far. And until you get a hard freeze, you're good to go to keep the lemons on the tree until it actually freezes. If you know it's going to freeze, you want to get those lemons off and get them in the house. Here's our comfrey. Comfrey's looking pretty good. I mean, it actually likes the cold, I think, better than it likes the warm. Our banana trees. Now these are the dwarf bananas that we had for decoration, essentially. Apparently they will actually produce bananas. I've never had them do it. They will usually freeze and or die in a freeze. And sometimes the trunk, if it's solid enough and big enough, will survive, but oftentimes it dies back, and then what you have is just new banana trees that come back from the leaves. Apple trees like the cold. Alright, up to a certain point. I think once it really gets a hard freeze, and you can see, man, I got apples everywhere on this tree, man. Which is kind of unusual. You would think they would bloom in the spring and then produce later on, but these are actually got a whole bunch of apples on them so far. So as long as the animals don't get to them, I'm looking forward to some good apples this year. Which we haven't really had a good production of apples. This is a pear tree. Now this pear is one we just recently got, and it is a pineapple pear. Okay, and it's kind of interesting that it's kept most of its leaves. They're looking a little worse for the wear, but they're doing okay. So it might be one that produces later on in the year. I'm kind of hoping that this is going to be a cross-pollinator from other pear tree. This is a plum tree, which is still doing fine. Our plum bush. I got to cut it back some. That's going to be one of the projects here shortly. And normally it would have lost its leaves as well. And then here, this is a baby loquat tree, and it is doing just fine. They will survive through the winter, and in fact they will be one of the first producing plants in the springtime, with the exception of a couple others. Alright, this is our fig tree. This is the brown turkey fig. It's actually got figs on it, more figs than I had seen in the summer. This fig tree has just not done great. Alright, it has taken its sweet time. We had this a couple of years before we got this one. Alright, that's an Ashia fig. The Ashia fig still has figs on it, still producing, and is growing leaves back, which is very interesting. You can see we had a frost night before last, or no, last night. And you can see some of the leaves have browned up a bit, but it keeps putting more leaves back out. So until it gets a hard freeze, I think we'll be fine. And you can tell we still have a lot of figs on the tree. Now whether or not they survive to get big enough to eat, just going to depend on when we get more frost. Oh, and I wanted to show you this too. So over here, this is a little bit less protected because the tree, the pear tree, hadn't grown up real well. But that is the longevity spinach. And this is what usually happens with longevity spinach, just right here. Okay, so what usually happens with longevity spinach is that it will freeze, die back to the roots, and then it'll come back from the roots so far every year. Even when we got down in the 20s, it keeps coming back. All right, it's a good solid food source that lasts for a long time. Got some collard greens here. They love the cold. They seem to do even better and taste better in the cold, in my opinion. This is another lemon tree, and it's doing fine. I mean, you can see I've got lemons all over the place on it. All right, there's a bunch of them in there if you look. So we're doing just fine on the lemon tree. And this here, these branches here, on down into that section down there, that's our pomegranates, one of our pomegranate trees. Never produced any flowers yet. Not sure why. Maybe it doesn't get quite enough sun, but I would think it would. So we'll see. Hopefully one day. We have some more over here. I'll show you. Our banana trees are doing okay, though they don't like the frost either. These are the ice cream bananas, which we actually got bananas this year, and they were really good. Now this one here, that's, you can see it's kind of propped up. We propped it up because we had bananas, a banana stalk growing off of it, and they were tasty and delicious, and we really liked them. So, but once they produce a banana bunch, then that tree is done. So we'll cut that back, use it for compost in that same area. But you can see I've got plenty more that are coming up and looking good, and then it'll keep throwing shoots up. And eventually this will get into a pretty good sized banana patch if I let it, which I probably will. All right, another fig tree here, the Charlie Brown fig tree. This is a Italian honey fig, and it has looked like this for probably 3 or 4 years now. I still have hopes. As you can see, I put a lot of mulch down around it, trying to keep it moist enough. And you can see it has one leaf, and it'll pop out a few leaves, then they'll kind of die back for whatever reason. And then, you know, it'll grow a little bit, but it really hasn't grown much. Maybe 6 inches in the entire time I've had it. So, don't know. We'll see. Up here, you can see from right there and up, that is my moringa tree. As you can see, it's gotten really tall. Well, actually, it's still tall from last year. Never froze last year. So this moringa tree has still survived, and you can see it still has leaves and such on it. Has not frozen. So it seems to be able to tolerate a frost, but not a freeze. Though you can see all the different stalks that I have here. Prior to last year, every year it has frozen back and then come back from the roots. It's been really good about that. All right, and then this is a little more protected area. You can tell that because this is also a pomegranate tree, but if you look, you can see that we still have leaves there, and which is interesting. The other ones do not, and I think that that's because they're more exposed. All right, so this is a little more of a protected environment here. So it's doing well, and of course that's another of the loquat trees, baby loquats. We really like the loquats. Got another one back over there, and then this one here, the stick you see in front of you, right there, that is our pecan tree. Which we'll see if this thing gets giant, like I think it will. But it did well this year. But it is a deciduous tree that loses its leaves. You can see it still has a few leaves there, but it's going to lose its leaves in the wintertime. Lemongrass is still green, so you can tell it hadn't really froze hard yet. Of course, our grape over the arbor has completely lost all of its leaves. I got to trim it all back pretty severely this year. And let's get into the garden proper. Now you can see all of the stuff that I planted for my winter garden is still doing just fine. Alright, we have lots of lettuce. And then over here, let me get out of the sun here. Starting to lose my sun. Alright, this one right here, that's broccoli. And there's several plants all throughout. It's doing just fine, though the bugs are eating it up. Hopefully it'll outgrow the bug population, especially if it gets cold. It should do just fine in a frost or a freeze. Same thing with the kale here. This is the curly kale. And the carrots. Again, they should all do fine with a light freeze. Should be good down into the 20s if necessary. And these here are the radishes. What the heck's the name of them? I'll think of it here in a second. But they're a cold weather radish. It's a big, long monster radish. Man, did I not put them? I cannot remember. But anyway, that's all volunteer. You can see they're all over the place. It's all volunteer, and they're growing up, doing just fine. They love it in the wintertime. They seem to grow way better in the wintertime. Then along here, we got several items. We got radishes back here. That's the radishes. This is our tatsoi right in here. And then behind that, we have, which are not quite growing as fast as I thought they would. All right, these are collard greens. All right. And I'll have to thin some of this out. I'm trying to thin out the tatsoi as we grow it. Over here are our bunching onions, which love the wintertime. Lots and lots of bunching onions. Alright, some of the stuff that did die back is my eggplant. Eggplant does not like the cold. I mean, it's in the same family as tomatoes, I believe. But either way, it's not going to do well in the cold. I got to come out here, harvest all that, get it put away, frozen up, so on. Radishes don't mind the cold. They're doing just fine. Bok choy, which is this here, loves it. Actually, bok choy won't continue to grow once it gets above 80. This right here is the sad remains of my basil. So basil is not going to work in the wintertime. Just a little experiment I did. But now something that does do well in the wintertime is our Swiss chard. So you can see along that line there and this line right here, that's all of my Swiss chard. Fantastic eating green, tastes really good, lasts good in the wintertime. It's just fine, it's doing fantastic. Chives are coming back, they're looking really good. They're another one that doesn't mind the winter. And then of course cabbage, same thing. Cabbage doesn't seem to mind it unless it gets really cold. Peppers. Well, let's talk about the green bean first. This is a volunteer green bean, which I hadn't really planned on growing, but you know what the heck, it started growing, so I left it. And you see I got green beans on it. So I'll either come out and harvest those to eat, or I'll let them just dangle and produce seeds for next year. But that was a volunteer. It seems to be doing okay. Peppers. Peppers don't like the cold. They're kind of like tomatoes that way as well, but some of them are doing okay. This one died back here. Alright, but this banana, the sweet banana pepper, which was this one right here, seems to be doing just fine. I had to prop it up, but it's still producing. So I'll let it continue as long as it wants to. And then that's a jalapeno there, which is also produced. We'll see if it dies back. If it does, it's okay. I'll get more plants. I have plenty of seed. And then of course we got some more bok choy down in there. So that's a lot of what has done well and what has not done so well. Alright. As far as fruit, so this one here is a kumquat tree. They're a nice tasty snack that produces like right around Christmas time. This is about the time of year that it really seems to kick out some fruit. It's a great source of vitamin C. You either got to like them or not. You will either like them or not. It depends upon your taste. Kind of an unusual taste for citrus, but it is very citrusy, and it will provide you some food. I've got a couple of these trees, and they do well in the winter. Same thing with the loquats. You know, I got my giant loquats. They're producing lots of fruit. You can see the fruit is just starting to form. So we should have a ton of loquats this year. What I neglected to do this year was to cut it back. It's gotten giant. I need to cut it back to a manageable level, but I got to do that after it fruits. So that should have been done in the summertime. Another loquat here, which seems to be doing just fine. Alright, it hasn't really started producing fruit yet. Oh yeah, it does. It does have a few. You can see them right there. And then more up there. So we are producing fruit. Mulberries, these back here have not lost all their leaves, and they in fact still have a little bit of fruit left on them as well. Kind of see that there. So they're coming back. Another loquat there. I know this part of the garden is kind of a mess, but I did want to show you this batch right here. Looks like grass. That's actually my garlic chives, and they're doing just fine. They don't mind the winter. They get a little beat down, but they do just fine in the winter time. Got this all cleared out. I'm gonna get back to work fixing that up, getting it all set up. Another olive tree here. It's doing just fine. And then of course my persimmon tree, we got all the persimmons off. Excuse me. The animals were starting to really get to the persimmons once they got ripe. The pear tree, which is really interesting, apparently the pear thinks it is spring. So it is actually putting out new leaves, and it's got some blooms. But last year, it did not produce fruit from these blooms. But if you look up there, see if I can get you in on it a little closer. Yeah, see right there? Let's see, right above there. That is a pear. So, which is pretty interesting that it's actually looking to produce a pear this time of year. I mean, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, we'll see. And even my smaller one that I got from my air layering has blooms on it. So now if we don't freeze, maybe they'll produce, maybe they won't. We'll see. I don't think it'll last. It would be nice to get some pears on this tree this year though. It's blooming now, maybe it'll bloom in the spring. Alright, the peach tree, I know I saw him. Where did I see him at? Even the peach tree thinks it's spring. It's trying to put out blooms. So, I don't know, there's a couple more up there. But this is December. I mean, it's going to freeze back again. So, we'll see. I don't know what's going to end up happening. Mulberry bush there, which isn't doing great. This is my really good peach tree right here. And it also had a few blooms, I thought. I'm just hoping that it doesn't mess with the tree, make it think it's spring, bloom out all of a sudden, and then freeze off and die, and then we lose fruit for the year. But that's just part of what we'll have to deal with. The orange tree here is not nearly as protected as the others, and it looks like some of the leaves got beat up a little bit, but if you look, you can see there's new growth coming. So this should not start flowering until after all the fruit's been taken off, which we just did. So I'm going to get in there and cut that back on the top at least, that part that's sticking way up because I can't really reach it too well. And then we'll see how it does. This year it produced fruit, but a lot of the fruit, I mean probably, I don't know, 75 to 80% of the fruit, if not more, rotted. Some of it on the tree, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that. These are the dwarf bananas. Same as the ones that I showed you earlier, but they're all dying back. That's what they usually look like after even a light freeze or a light frost. And then this right here is our avocado. Now the avocado seems to be doing fine, but the rootstock, all right, so what had happened, I bought a tree that was supposed to make it down to 20 degrees, and it died well above 20 degrees. So I don't know what happened and why, but this came back from rootstock. So my plan is to let this grow, see how it goes, and then possibly on some of the branches do some splicing in of other varieties. We'll see how that goes. That's something I'm planning to do in the future. I have yet to get an avocado tree any bigger than that. All right, so we'll see, you know, what ends up happening there. But I kind of wanted to show you what dies off in the frost and what survives. Any of the plants that are related to tomatoes are just not going to make it. A lot of your greens seem to do just fine, with the exception of tropical greens, like I said, with the longevity spinach. I do want to show you this though. It's kind of neat. So this is the longevity spinach here. More exposed, less covered, got more frost on it. But if you come over here, up underneath just this slight amount of coverage from the fig tree, you'll see the same plant right here, which is that longevity spinach, is doing much better. All right, so you can create microclimates within your garden that will do just fine. All right, that will basically change the temperature by a few degrees either way, depending on how you're trying to set up your microclimate. And then this here is my goji berry. You can see right there I have a goji berry. This plant just hadn't done well. I think it's because it doesn't get enough sun. I underestimated how much sun it needed, but this is our biggest bush and is doing okay so far. It really likes it now once the leaves are pretty much primarily gone off of the fig tree that's right above it. I do have a couple others back over here that are doing okay, like this one right there, but it really has never bloomed, so far at least. So we'll see. I'll continue to mess with that and try and get some goji berries growing at some point, because they're pretty tasty. I mean, we like them. Onions. So I planted onions by seed, and garlic. Man, the garlic is going crazy. I desperately need to get in here and weed, but the garlic is loving it. And the onions are doing just fine. They should be fine even in a hard freeze, both the garlic and the onions. If I get back here, hopefully you can kind of see where the row of onions is. It's right along here. And what I've thought that I had, same thing right here, right along there. All right, so they're coming up. They're doing pretty nice. I decided, for some reason, I thought that my cilantro seed had gone bad. But you can see most of the weeds in here are cilantro. All right, almost all of them are cilantro. So I got to go in here and do some selective weeding. I want to keep a few like I've done over here. You can see I got one there, and then another one there, a couple more here. I'm gonna try and figure out, because I really thought maybe I'd get, 10 or 12 plants. But I had so much cilantro seed, I just took a handful and tossed it. And then basically, because I rototilled this area, I rototilled that in with the rest of the soil. And like I said, 90% of that, you can see, is more of this cilantro. So it gets up a little bit bigger. Maybe in a week or so, I'm going to go ahead and harvest a lot of it. And we'll dry it, save it for later. And then that'll kind of clear out the onions. And then I've got to get these onions thinned out, because as you can see, they're very close together. So I need to get them thinned out to the point where I can have big, nice, large onions growing, so that, you know, I get some nice fat ones that'll last until next year. And then over here, the garlic is doing just fantastic. But one of the things I want to do, that I'm going to go ahead and clear out completely. I will completely clear that area out, and then I want to mulch it all in, so that basically it keeps a nice, consistent, cool temperature. Because I mean, even though we had a freeze, what was it, last night? A frost, I should say, not a freeze, but a frost. Even though we had a frost, the day before that was 85 degrees or 80 degrees, something like that. 80, just a little over 80. So we get these wide swings in temperatures here in Northeast Florida, and hopefully covering it with the mulch should keep that temperature swing down a little more, so that the garlic doesn't think that it's done growing and start to put out scapes, which means that you won't get as good a production on the garlic itself. So that's one of the things I'm planning on doing, is mulching that in real well, and it is something that everybody says you should do with garlic. Well, everybody, what I've seen, has talked about how you should mulch your garlic. Alright guys, so that's pretty much what's going on right now. We have some fruit still growing. All of our citrus still doing fine so far. If we don't get a really hard freeze, that should be fine. It should start blooming out like probably beginning of January. Well, let's say the middle of January to the beginning of February time frame is, I think, when it usually blooms out. And then we'll start getting, you know, fruit production from there. We'll see how it goes again this year. We have lost a lot of the summertime vegetables, of course. You know, that's to be expected. It got cold, so it's actually knocked them back a bit. Some of our summertime greens have died back as well, though some are still surviving, which is kind of interesting. In the protected areas, they seem to be okay. And again, you know, one of the things you can do is setting up microclimates. Now, I'm not the expert on this, but essentially, if things are covered and the wind is knocked down by a lot of vegetation around it, oftentimes it will keep things warmer, because that allows that heat to emanate up from the ground, which stays a pretty solid temperature, particularly once you get down a little lower, and tends to be a bit warmer. So it keeps that frost off the leaves, and that seems to keep things alive a lot longer. And you can look into creating microclimates, but essentially limiting wind and excessive sunlight, by having an overstory and so on, will help out keeping things alive a little bit deeper into the wintertime, depending on your location and all of that, of course. But here in the Northeast Florida area, just a little bit of coverage seems to go a long way. So, with that being said, that's what I got going on. Some things have frozen off, even though it hadn't been a hard freeze. Just a frost is enough. A lot of the wintertime vegetables that we planted are frost tolerant, and you can really tell that they're doing just fine. And in fact, some of them, like kale and collards, have a better, sweeter taste when they get cold. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Do me a favor, give me a like and a subscribe, and let me know what you think. But most importantly, grow something. Get something growing in your backyard. You can even have things growing in the wintertime here in Northeast Florida, all the way through the season. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Y'all take care. Come back and see me.